season bow good? I've heard it is, actually.
He thought she was just background noise. A clumsy waitress in a cheap uniform, invisible to a man who owned the city. When Dante Cavallaro, the capo of the New York families, looked down at the wine stain on his $4,000 bespoke shoe, he didn't scream. He simply leaned over and whispered a brutal, vulgar insult in an ancient, dying Sicilian dialect, a language of ghosts and killers that no American girl should know. He expected her to tremble. Instead, she looked him dead in the eye and responded in the exact same dialect, correcting his grammar while threatening his life. That was the moment Dante realized the girl wasn't a waitress. She was a warning. The heat in the kitchen of L'Ombra was enough to melt the resolve of a saint, and Clara was no saint. She was just tired. At 24, with calloused hands and a fake name pinned to her apron. Sarah, she was trying to disappear in the one place where nobody looked you in the eye, the service industry of New York City's meat-packing district. L'Ombra wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress wrapped in velvet and dimly lit mahogany. It was where the city's elite came to eat truffles shaved by chefs who had Michelin stars, and where men who didn't exist on any census came to discuss business that would never appear in a ledger. Clara adjusted the heavy tray on her shoulder, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. Table 4 needs the 82 Brunello, the maitre d'. A nervous little man named Gilbert hissed at her. And for God's sake, Sarah, don't make eye contact. The Cavallaro party just sat down. Clara froze. The tray rattled slightly. Cavallaro. The name was a curse. It was a ghost story, whispered in the dark corners of her childhood. She kept her head down, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She should have called in sick. She should have run out the back door the moment she saw the black SUVs line up along the cobblestones outside. But rent was due, and fear didn't pay the landlord. She walked out onto the floor. The atmosphere had shifted. Usually the restaurant buzzed with the hum of conversation and clinking silverware. Now the air felt thin, pressurized. Table 4 was in the center, commanding the room. 4 men sat there, but only one mattered. Dante Cavallaro. He didn't look like the caricatures in the movies. He wasn't chomping a cigar or wearing a fedora. He was terrifyingly modern. He wore a suit cut so sharp it could draw blood charcoal gray against a black dress shirt. His hair was dark, swept back, and his face was a mask of bored indifference. He was looking at his phone, ignoring the men around him who were laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny. Clara approached the table. Invisible, she told herself. Be invisible. The Brunello gentleman, she said, her voice soft, adopting the flat, generic American accent she had perfected over 3 years. Dante didn't look up. One of his soldiers, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, named Enzo, leered at her. Pour it, sweetheart. And don't shake. The boss hates sediment. Clara reached over to pour Dante's glass first. It was protocol. As she tilted the bottle, Enzo, perhaps thinking it was funny, or perhaps just clumsy from too much pre-dinner whiskey, threw his arm out to emphasize a point. His elbow struck Clara's hip. It happened in slow motion. Clara lurched. The bottle dipped. A single dark crimson splash of vintage wine arced through the air and landed squarely on the toe of Dante Cavallaro's pristine Italian leather Oxford. The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if the entire restaurant had stopped breathing. Enzo's face went pale. "Boss, Dante raised a hand. Enzo shut his mouth instantly. Dante slowly looked down at his shoe. Then he looked up. For the first time, his eyes met Clara's. They were the color of cold espresso, dark and devoid of mercy. He didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He simply stared at her with a look of utter disdain, as if she were a cockroach that had scurried across his dinner plate. He leaned in slightly, his voice a low, gravelly murmur that didn't carry to the other tables, intended only for her and his men. "Talia sta fitusa," he whispered the words rolling off his tongue in heavy, guttural Sicilian. Not the Italian taught in schools, but the dialect of the distinct rocky hills of the old country. "Pari navakka kasimpicikau entafangu. Levati di doku prima katishipu a testa." Look at this filthy thing. She looks like a cow stuck in the mud. Get out of here before I rip your head off. It was a test. It was an insult meant to degrade her, spoken in a language he was certain this ignorant American waitress would never understand. He expected her to apologize in English, to cry, to run for a tool. Clara felt the heat rise up her neck. Not fear, rage. The dialect hit her like a physical blow. It was the language of her grandmother. It was the language of the kitchen table she had been dragged away from 10 years ago. It was the language of the men who had burned her world down. She forgot the plan. She forgot the fake name. She forgot the danger. The arrogance in his eyes triggered something dormant and dangerous in her blood. Clara straightened her spine. The trembling in her hands stopped instantly. She looked down at him, her expression hardening into a mask of cold steel that mirrored his own. "Avaka sinuri sapi unni camminare. Meghiu. Dilushekku kasi sentire," she replied softly, her voice dropping an octave, slipping effortlessly into the exact same rough mountain dialect of western Sicily. "E si vossia tocca a me testa sa trova senza manu, prima di capire chi successi." The cow, sir, knows where to walk better than the donkey who thinks he is a king. And if you touch my head, you will find yourself without a hand before you realize what happened. The reaction was visceral. Enzo choked on his water. The other two men reached for the inside of their jackets, their hands hovering over concealed weapons. But Dante didn't move. The boredom vanished from his face. His eyes widened just a fraction, the pupils dilating. He stared at her, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the way she stood, feet shoulder-width apart, balanced ready. He heard the accent. It wasn't just Sicilian. It was Palermitano, specifically the inflection used in the old neighborhoods where the families originated. The air between them crackled with a tension that was suddenly sexual and violent all at once. "Who are you?" Dante asked, switching to English, his voice dangerous and low. Clara blinked, the adrenaline crashing as reality rushed back in. "What have I done?" She stepped back, clutching the wine bottle to her chest like a shield. I'll get a towel for your shoe, sir," she stammered in English, forcing the tremor back into her voice. She turned and fled toward the kitchen. Her heart beating so hard, she thought it might crack her ribs. She didn't look back, but she could feel his eyes burning a hole between her shoulder blades. She knew with a sinking dread that she hadn't just spilled wine. She had spilled blood in the water, and the shark had just caught the scent. Clara crashed through the swinging doors of the kitchen, nearly knocking over a sous chef carrying a tray of scallops. "Sarah, watch it," the chef yelled. She ignored him, rushing to the back staff sink. She turned the water on cold and splashed it on her face, gasping for air. Stupid, stupid, stupid. She had spent 3 years building Sarah. Sarah was from Ohio. Sarah liked reality TV and chewing gum. Sarah did not speak the dialect of the Cosa Nostra. Sarah did not threaten to cut off the hands of capos. "Gilbert," she called out, spotting the manager. "I'm sick. I have to go. Now." Gilbert looked at her, his face pale. He was wiping sweat from his upper lip with a handkerchief. "You can't go, Sarah." "I'm throwing up. It's food poisoning." She lied, untying her apron with shaking hands. "No," Gilbert said, his voice trembling. He stepped in front of her, blocking the exit to the alleyway. "You don't understand. He asked for you." Clara went cold. "Who?" "Cavallaro. He told me to send you back out. He said if you leave the building, he burns the building down." Gilbert looked like he was about to cry. "Sarah, please. I have a family. Just go apologize. Whatever you did, just fix it." Clara looked at the back door. It was 10 feet away. Freedom. If she ran, she'd have to leave the city tonight. Maybe the country. But if she ran, Dante's men would catch her before she made it to the subway. You didn't outrun men like Dante Cavallaro. You had to outlast them. She took a deep breath, smoothing her hair. She needed to de-escalate. She needed to convince him she was just a parrot, a girl who picked up phrases from an ex-boyfriend or a grandmother, but knew nothing of the life. She walked back out. The restaurant seemed quieter now. Every waiter, every busboy seemed to be giving table 4 a wide berth. As she approached, she saw that Dante hadn't touched his food. He was leaning back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass, the wine she had poured. He watched her approach. There was no anger in his face anymore. Only a terrifying, predatory curiosity. "I apologize for the delay, sir," Clara said, keeping her eyes on the tablecloth. "I went to find a stain remover for the leather." "Sit," Dante said. It wasn't a request. "Sir, I'm working. I can't." "I bought the table," Dante interrupted. He gestured to the empty chairs. His men were gone. He had dismissed them. It was just him. "I bought the hour, and I bought your time. Sit down." Clara hesitated, then pulled out the chair opposite him. She sat on the edge, ready to bolt. Dante took a sip of the wine, his eyes never leaving her face. "You have an interesting accent, Sarah, from Ohio," he said the fake name with mocking precision. "It sounded like you were raised in the Vucceria market in Palermo, but your personnel file says you were born in Dayton." Clara's blood ran cold. "He checked my file already." "It's been 5 minutes. My grandmother," she lied quickly. "She was from Sicily. She raised me. She had a temper. I picked up the bad words first." "Is that so?" Dante leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "That wasn't just a bad word. That was a threat. And the syntax. That was old world. We don't speak like that anymore. Not unless we are very angry or very honest." He reached into his jacket pocket. Clara flinched. Dante paused, a smirk touching his lips. "Jumpy." He pulled out a pack of cigarettes and a gold lighter. He lit one, blowing the smoke to the side. "You threatened to cut off my hand. Do you know who I am?" "You're a customer," she said. "I am the reason this restaurant still has a liquor license. I am the reason the garbage trucks come to this street. I am the reason you breathe safely in this city." He tapped ash into a crystal tray. "And you are a liar." I'm a waitress. Show me your hands. What? Put your hands on the table. Clara slowly placed her hands on the white linen. They were rough, chapped from dish soap and sanitizer. But Dante wasn't looking at the skin. He was looking at the calluses on her index finger and thumb. He reached out his fingers, brushing hers. His skin was hot dry. He traced the ridge of hard skin on the inside of her right index finger. This isn't from carrying trays, Dante murmured softly. This is a trigger callus. You shoot. Clara snatched her hand back as if burned. I go to the range. It's a hobby. It's dangerous in the city for a woman alone. A hobby? Dante mused. He took a drag of his cigarette, his eyes narrowing. You speak the dialect of the clans. You know how to stand when threatened. You have a shooter's hand. And you have the eyes of someone who is constantly looking for the exit. He stood up abruptly. Clara scrambled back her chair, scraping loudly against the floor. Dante walked around the table. He didn't touch her. He just invaded her space, towering over her, smelling of expensive tobacco, sandalwood, and danger. He leaned down, his mouth inches from her ear. Dimmi a verita piccerita. He whispered the endearment, sounding like a threat. Kuti manau. Tell me the truth, little one. Who sent you? No one sent me. Clara whispered back, her voice shaking for real this time. I'm just a nobody. Dante pulled back, looking at her face, searching for a crack in the armor. There are no nobodies who speak my language, Sarah. Everyone belongs to someone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of cash $100 bills, thick as a Bible. He dropped it on the table. Keep the change, he said. Your shift is over. He turned and walked away, his stride long and confident. Clara let out a breath she had been holding for 10 minutes. She watched him leave, thinking she had survived. But as he reached the maitre d' station, Dante stopped. He didn't turn around, but she saw him say something to Gilbert. Gilbert nodded frantically, looking terrified. Dante walked out the front door. Clara grabbed her tips and ran to the back. She changed in 30 seconds, shoving her uniform into her locker. She burst out the back door into the cool night air of the alleyway, her only thought to get home, pack a bag, and disappear. She took 2 steps and stopped. A black SUV was parked directly across the exit of the alley, blocking the path. The engine was idling. The back window rolled down slowly. Dante Cavallaro sat in the back seat, bathed in the shadows. Get in, he said. I'd rather die. Clara spat the English falling away, the bravado returning. That, Dante said, the door clicking unlock can also be arranged. But I think you're more curious than you are afraid. You want to know why I didn't kill you at the table. Clara stood her ground. Why? Because, Dante said, his eyes gleaming in the dark. I haven't heard that dialect since my father died. And I want to know why a waitress in Manhattan sounds like the ghost of the man who built this city. He waited. Get in, Chiara, or whatever your real name is. If you run, I will hunt you. If you get in, you might survive the night. Clara looked at the open street beyond the SUV. It was empty. She looked at Dante. He knew. He didn't know who she was, but he knew what she was. She walked forward and opened the door. The interior of the SUV was a sealed capsule of silence and tension. The windows were tinted so dark, the city lights of Manhattan blurred into streaks of nebulous gold and neon ghosting across Dante's sharp profile. Clara sat pressed against the door, her hand gripping the handle, though she knew the child locks were engaged. She was trapped. Relax, Dante said, not looking at her. He was scrolling through emails on his phone, the blue light illuminating the hard line of his jaw. If I was going to kill you, I would have let Enzo do it in the alley. He enjoys it. I view it as administrative work. Comforting, Clara muttered, her voice dry. Dante chuckled a low sound that vibrated in the small space. You have a mouth on you. Most people in this car are praying. You're being sarcastic. It confirms my theory, which is that you were born into this life. Civilians fear death. People like us, we just fear a bad death. He finally turned to look at her, his eyes assessing. Where are you from? Veramente. That dialect. It's specific. It's from the hills above Palermo. Monreale Piana degli Albanesi. Clara's heart skipped a beat. He was too sharp. I told you. My grandmother. And I told you that you're a liar. The car slowed, turning smoothly into the underground garage of a glass and steel fortress in Tribeca. The heavy metal gate rattled shut behind them, sealing them in. Where are we? Clara demanded, her hand instinctively moving to her hip, where a holster would be if she were still who she used to be. Home, Dante said. Get out. The elevator ride was silent. When the doors opened, they stepped directly into a penthouse that spanned the entire floor. It was a museum of wealth and cold isolation. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Hudson River, but the shades were drawn halfway, filtering the moonlight. The furniture was Italian minimalist leather chrome marble. It was beautiful, and it felt like a mausoleum. Dante tossed his jacket onto a sofa and walked to a wet bar made of black onyx. Bourbon? Or do you prefer wine, seeing as you enjoy throwing it so much? Water, Clara said, remaining by the elevator doors. She was calculating exits. The elevator required a key card. The stairs would be alarmed. The windows were reinforced glass. Dante poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a tumbler and slid a glass of water across the marble counter. Come here, drink. Clara approached, slowly stepping onto the plush rug. She took the water but didn't drink. You have a scar, Dante observed, pointing with his glass. Clara froze. She was wearing a long-sleeved uniform shirt. On your neck, he clarified. Just below the ear. I saw it in the car when we passed a streetlight. A thin white line. Knife. Clara instinctively touched the spot. It was a souvenir from a night 4 years ago, the night her father's empire burned. Kitchen accident. A broken plate. Dante stepped closer, invading her personal space again. The air between them grew heavy, charged with the magnetic pull of 2 predators, sizing each other up. He reached out his fingers, brushing the hair away from her neck. His touch was surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence inherent in his name. That wasn't a plate, he whispered, his thumb tracing the scar. That was a blade. Someone tried to slit your throat and they missed. Who missed Clara? My name is Sarah. Stop it. Dante's voice cracked like a whip, his patience snapping. He slammed his glass down on the counter, the sound echoing through the room. Do not lie to me in my own house. You speak the lingua siciliana. You handle yourself like a soldier. You have defensive wounds. You are not a waitress. He trapped her against the counter, placing his hands on either side of her hips. He lowered his face until they were nose to nose. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, burning with frustration and a strange, intense fascination. The families are at war, Dante hissed. The Russos are making moves in Brooklyn. The Triads are pushing in from the south. I have enemies everywhere. If you are a spy, tell me now and I will make it quick. If you are an assassin, try your luck. But do not insult my intelligence by pretending to be Sarah from Ohio. Clara looked up at him. She saw the exhaustion behind his aggression. He was a king surrounded by wolves, and he was tired. For a split second, she wanted to tell him, "I am Chiara Vitale. My father was the Don of the Vitale crime family before your uncle wiped us out." But telling him would be suicide. The Cavallaros and the Vitales had a blood feud that went back 3 generations. "I'm not a spy," she said, her voice steady. "I'm just someone who wants to be left alone." Dante stared at her, searching for the lie. He leaned in closer, his gaze dropping to her lips. The threat was fading, replaced by a raw, undeniable chemistry. The adrenaline of the confrontation was morphing into something else. "Your trouble," he murmured. "I should have let you run." "Why didn't you?" "Because," Dante said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper, "I haven't felt challenged in a very long time." He moved as if to kiss her, the tension reaching a breaking point. Clara held her breath, her body betraying her mind, leaning in slightly. Crack. The sound was sharp and deafening like a thunderclap inside the room. The reinforced glass of the window to their right spiderwebbed a small hole, punching through the center. A vase on the counter exploded, showering them with shards of porcelain and water. Instinct took over, before thought could process the sound. "Down!" Clara screamed. She didn't cower. She didn't scream for help. She lunged forward, tackling the capo of the New York Mafia. She slammed her shoulder into Dante's chest, knocking him backward behind the cover of the heavy onyx island, just as a second bullet tore through the air where his head had been a microsecond before. Thwack! The bullet buried itself in the plaster of the far wall. Dante hit the floor hard, Clara landing on top of him. For a moment they were a tangle of limbs and heavy breathing. "Sniper!" she hissed, rolling off him and keeping her head low. "South tower! High angle!" Dante looked at her stunned. Not by the assassination attempt, that was an occupational hazard, but by her. She moved with fluid, practiced efficiency. She wasn't shaking. She was calculating. "Stay down," Dante growled, snapping back to reality. He reached for the ankle holster concealed under his pant leg, pulling out a compact Glock 43. "That's a pea shooter," Clara scoffed, crawling rapidly toward the edge of the island to peek. "At this range you can't hit them. We need to move. They'll switch to a higher caliber to punch through the cover." "How do you know that?" "Physics," she lied, though it was actually training from her uncle, the family's enforcer. "Do you have a security room?" "A panic room. Bedroom, vault door," Dante barked. "On my count." Another shot rang out. This one punched through the marble countertop, sending stone shrapnel flying. It missed Dante's ear by an inch, cutting a shallow gash in his cheek. Blood welled up instantly, bright red against his skin. "They have thermal," Clara realized, seeing the trajectory. "They can see our heat signatures through the stone. We can't stay here." Dante touched his cheek, looking at the blood on his fingers. His eyes went cold, the seduction from moments ago, replaced by the icy rage of a killer. "Bedroom. Now." They scrambled. They ran in a crouch, staying below the window line. Bullets tracked them, tearing up the expensive hardwood floor, shattering artwork, disintegrating a lamp. It was suppressing fire. They were being herded. They burst into the master bedroom. Dante slammed a heavy button on the wall. A steel shutter began to descend over the bedroom windows, but it was slow. Too slow. "Get behind the bed," Dante yelled. He turned to fire blindly out the window, trying to suppress the shooter, but he was exposed. Clara saw it before he did. A red laser dot danced across Dante's chest. "Dante, move." She didn't think. She grabbed him by the belt and yanked him backward. He stumbled, falling onto the mattress, just as the window shattered inward. The bullet meant for his heart grazed his shoulder, tearing through the fine fabric of his shirt and flesh. He grunted, dropping his gun. The weapon skittered across the floor, sliding under the dresser. The steel shutters slammed closed with a final metallic clang, sealing the room in darkness. Silence returned, heavy and ringing. "Are you hit?" Clara asked, her voice breathless. She crawled over the bed to him. "Grazed," Dante gritted out. He was sitting up, clutching his shoulder. Blood was seeping between his fingers, staining his white shirt crimson. "My gun. Where is it?" "Under the dresser. Leave it." Clara grabbed a silk tie from the end of the bed and moved his hand away. "Let me see." "I'm fine," he snapped, trying to push her away. "You're bleeding on your sheets," she countered, her voice authoritative. "Hold still. I've patched worse than this." She worked quickly, using the tie as a tourniquet to slow the bleeding. Her hands, which had trembled in the restaurant, were now rock steady. She checked the wound clean pass through the fleshy part of the deltoid. Painful, but not lethal. Dante watched her in the dim light. The adrenaline was fading, leaving clarity in its wake. He looked at the woman binding his wound. She had saved his life twice in 3 minutes. She had identified the sniper's position. She had anticipated the thermal imaging. "Who are you?" he asked again. This time there was no anger, only a quiet, terrifying seriousness. "And don't say Sarah." Clara tied off the knot. She sat back on her heels, wiping his blood from her hands onto her waitress apron. She looked at the steel shutters, then back at him. There was no point anymore. The mask was shattered on the living room floor. "My name," she said, her voice dropping to that rough Sicilian dialect, "is Chiara. Chiara Vitale." Dante went rigid. The name hung in the air like smoke. Vitale. The family his uncle had massacred in the Night of Long Knives 4 years ago. The family that was supposed to be extinct. "Vitale." Dante repeated the word, tasting like ash. "Lorenzo Vitale's daughter." "Yes." Dante laughed a harsh, mirthless sound. He leaned his head back against the headboard, closing his eyes. "Of course. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. I spent 3 years hunting the last of the Vitales, and she spills wine on my shoe." He opened his eyes, looking at her with a new intensity. "You know I should kill you. By the laws of our fathers, I have to kill you." "Your uncle killed my father," Clara said, her voice hard. "He killed my brothers. I should have let that bullet take your heart. Why didn't you?" Clara looked down at her hands. "Because your uncle is dead, and you didn't pull the trigger that night. You were in London." "I was." Dante watched her carefully. "But I am a cavallaro. We are enemies, Chiara. Blood for blood." "Then do it," she said. She reached under the dresser and pulled out his Glock. She stood up and walked over to him, flipping the gun so the handle faced him. She held it out. "Finish the job your family started." Dante looked at the gun. Then he looked at her. She stood tall, proud, wearing a stained waitress uniform, offering him the weapon to end her life. She looked like a queen in exile. He reached out, his hand wrapped around the gun, but he didn't raise it. He thumbed the safety on and set it on the nightstand. "No," he said. "No. Someone just tried to take my head off, and it wasn't you." Dante stood up, wincing slightly as his shoulder protested. He walked to her, towering over her again. But this time, the threat was different. It was a partnership forged in violence. "The Russos," Dante said, his mind working fast. "They think I'm weak. They think they can take the city." He looked at Chiara. "You're a ghost, Chiara. The world thinks you're dead. That makes you valuable. You know the old codes. You know the players. And clearly," he gestured to the shuttered window, "you know how to handle a war. I'm out of the life, Dante. I just want to survive." "You're a Vitale," he said, stepping closer, his bloodied shirt brushing against her arm. "We don't survive. We conquer." He reached out his hand, cupping her jaw, forcing her to look at him. His thumb brushed her lower lip. "I have a proposition," he whispered. "You help me find who ordered this hit. You help me burn them to the ground, and in exchange I give you the one thing you haven't had in 4 years." "What's that?" she breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Your name back," Dante said. "And Manhattan." Clara looked into his dark eyes. She saw the devil making a deal, but she also saw the only man who could protect her from the monsters in the dark. "And if I refuse, then you can walk out that door," Dante said. "But the Russos won't miss next time, and they won't care that you're just a waitress." Clara hesitated. Then a slow, dangerous smile spread across her lips. It was the smile of a Vitale. "I'm going to need a better gun," she said. Dante smirked, the pain in his shoulder forgotten. "I think we can arrange that." He walked to the walk-in closet, pushing aside a row of designer suits to reveal a biometric panel. He pressed his thumb against it. The back wall of the closet hissed and slid open, revealing an armory that would make a SWAT team jealous. "Welcome to the family, Chiara," Dante said. But before she could step forward, Dante's phone, which had been in his pocket, buzzed. He pulled it out. His face went pale. "What is it?" Clara asked, sensing the shift in the air. "It's a text," Dante said, his voice hollow. "From the number of my chief of security." "What does it say?" Dante turned the screen toward her. It was a picture of Clara's apartment door. Her fake name, Sra, was visible on the mail slot. The door was kicked in. The text underneath read, "We missed the king, so we took the queen's little sister." Clara stopped breathing. "My sister," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Sophia, she was supposed to be in boarding school. She came to visit me this weekend." Dante looked at her, his expression hardening into granite. "They have your sister. I thought I was safe." Clara choked out the waitress persona, dissolving into a panicked sister. "I thought nobody knew where I was." "Someone knew," Dante said darkly. "And now they have leverage." He racked the slide of a fresh pistol, checking the chamber. He tossed a semi-automatic rifle to Clara. She caught it instinctively. "We aren't hunting anymore," Dante said, his eyes burning with a terrifying promise of violence. "Now we go to war." The armory smelled of gun oil and cold steel, a sharp contrast to the expensive cologne and fear that had permeated the bedroom. Dante moved with a grim efficiency, despite the blood darkening the white bandage on his shoulder. He strapped a Kevlar vest over his ruined shirt, wincing as he tightened the Velcro. "You're favoring your left side," Chiara said. She was already dressed. She had found a tactical black turtleneck and cargo pants in the back of the closet, likely emergency gear for a bodyguard, but it fit her well enough. She looked less like a waitress now and more like the soldier she was born to be. "I'm fine," Dante grunted, checking the magazine of a Sig Sauer. "You're slowing us down," she countered, tossing him a bottle of painkillers from a first aid kit on the shelf. "Take 2. If we're going up against the Russos, I can't have you passing out from shock." Dante caught the bottle, his eyes locking with hers. You give a lot of orders for someone who was serving breadsticks an hour ago. And you take a lot of hits for a capo who claims to own the city. She shot back, checking the sights on the rifle. My sister is out there, Dante. If your people dropped the ball on my security, then I'm taking lead on the retrieval. Dante didn't argue. He dry swallowed the pills. He respected power, and right now Chiara Vitale was radiating it. My chief of security is Rocco, Dante said, pulling up a tracking program on a tablet mounted to the wall. He's been with me since I was 18. If they have his phone, he's dead. Or he talked. Rocco wouldn't talk. Dante's voice was final. The phone is pinging. It's moving. Where? Queens, Long Island City. It's heading toward the old industrial district near the water. Chiara's eyes narrowed. The rail yards. That's Russo territory. They use the shipping containers to move product. And bodies, Dante added grimly. He hit a button on the wall panel. We can't take the elevator. They'll have the lobby covered. We take the service lift to the garage, take the secondary car. It's an armored Audi, not the SUV, low profile. Let's go. The descent was silent. When the service elevator opened into the VIP section of the garage, the air was thick with tension. The black Audi A8 sat in the corner. Dante slid into the driver's seat, his movement stiff. Chiara took the passenger side, placing the rifle between her legs. As the engine roared to life, a deep, guttural growl, Dante glanced at her. If we do this, he said, his hand hovering over the gear shift, there is no going back to Sarah. The waitress is dead. The moment you step out of this car with a gun in your hand, the underworld will know Chiara Vitale is alive. You become a target again. Forever. Chiara looked at the concrete wall ahead. She thought of her quiet apartment, her shitty tips, the anonymity she had cherished. Then she thought of Sophia, 16 years old, innocent with braces on her teeth and a dream of being a veterinarian. Sophia, who was currently in the hands of butchers. Sarah was boring anyway, Chiara said, racking the charging handle of the rifle. Drive. Dante smashed the gas pedal. The Audi surged forward. They didn't take the main exit. Dante aimed the car at a chain-link maintenance gate at the far end of the garage. Hold on, he warned. The car hit the gate at 40 miles per hour. Metal screamed, sparks flew, and the gate crumpled, flying open. The Audi skidded out onto the wet pavement of the back alley, tires smoking as Dante corrected the drift and sped toward the bridge. The drive to Queens was a blur of red taillights and rain. Dante drove with one hand on the wheel, the other gripping his shoulder occasionally as the painkillers started to kick in. Talk to me, Dante said, breaking the silence as they crossed the Queensboro Bridge. Why did your father hide you? The Vitale brothers were famous. But the daughter, you were a rumor. Chiara kept her eyes on the side mirrors, checking for a tail. My father was a monster, Dante. You know that. But he loved my mother. When she died, he became paranoid. He trained my brothers to be soldiers, but he trained me to be his contingency plan. If the family fell, I was supposed to survive, to rebuild. He taught you to shoot. He taught me to kill, she corrected, and to blend in, and to speak 5 languages. I was his secret weapon. But I didn't want the throne. I just wanted out. When your uncle attacked the compound that night, I took Sophia and ran. I let the world think we died in the fire. Dante looked at her, a strange mixture of admiration and regret on his face. I would have found you eventually, if I had known. To kill me. I don't know, Dante admitted softly. Maybe. The GPS beeped. Target is stationary, the mechanical voice announced. Dante killed the headlights. They were in an industrial wasteland of rusted corrugated metal and barbed wire. The tracking dot led them to a massive, dilapidated warehouse complex that used to be a meat processing plant. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "Park here," Chiara whispered. "Between the trucks, we walk the last block." They geared up in the rain. The water soaked into Chiara's clothes, but she didn't feel the cold. She felt the familiar icy calm of the predator. They moved toward the warehouse, using the shadows of abandoned semi-trailers for cover. 2 guards stood by the loading dock door, smoking cigarettes. Their body language was relaxed. They weren't expecting a counterattack this fast. "You take left, I take right," Dante whispered, pressing his back against the wet metal of a dumpster. "No noise," Chiara signaled. "Suppressors." She raised her rifle. Dante raised his pistol. Thwip, thwip. 2 soft coughs echoed in the alley. The guards dropped simultaneously, crumbling into the wet asphalt without a sound. "Nice shot," Dante murmured, impressed. "You pulled slightly to the left," she critiqued, stepping over the bodies. "Your shoulder is stiff." "I'll manage." They stacked up at the door. Dante checked the handle. Locked. He produced a set of lock picks, but Chiara pushed his hand away. She pointed to the keypad. "It's a standard Russo code," she whispered. "They change it every month, but it's always based on the birthdays of Luca Russo's mistresses. Disgusting but predictable." She punched in a sequence of numbers. Beep. The light turned green. Dante stared at her. "Remind me never to play poker with you." "I don't play games, Dante. I win them." They slipped inside. The warehouse was cavernous, smelling of old blood and rust. It was dimly lit by hanging work lights. In the center of the vast space, a temporary office had been set up, a glass-walled box raised on a platform. And there, tied to a chair in the center of the open floor below the office, was Sophia. She was gagged, her eyes wide with terror. Tears streaming down her face. A man was pacing around her. He was tall, wearing a flashy suit that looked out of place in the filth. "Luca Russo," Dante hissed. "He's using her as bait," Chiara observed, scanning the rafters. "He knows we're coming. Look at the shadows on the second-floor catwalk. Snipers. We can't walk out there." "No," Chiara said. "But we can make them come to us." She pointed to a stack of propane tanks near a forklift on the far wall. "Can you hit that valve from here?" Dante leveled his pistol. The distance was 50 yards, with a wounded shoulder. "I can hit it." "Do it, then flank left." "Flank. I'll draw their fire." "Chiara, no. Do it." Dante exhaled, steadied his aim, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet sparked off the metal tank, puncturing the valve. Gas hissed out, invisible, but audible. Chiara didn't wait for the explosion. She pulled a flare from her tactical vest. Another item from Dante's closet, cracked it, and threw it in a high arc toward the tanks. Boom! The explosion was deafening. A fireball rolled up the wall, shaking the dust from the ceiling. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Men shouted. The snipers on the catwalk flinched, turning toward the blast. Chiara sprinted. She broke from cover, moving fast across the open floor, firing the rifle as she ran. She wasn't firing at the men. She was firing at the lights. Pop, pop, pop. The warehouse plunged into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the growing fire in the corner. "Get her!" Luca Russo screamed, diving behind a crate. Bullets chewed up the concrete around Chiara's feet, but she was fast, sliding behind a heavy steel pillar. She had drawn their eyes, which meant Dante was invisible. From the shadows on the left, Dante moved like a wraith. He ignored the pain in his shoulder, channeling it into focus. He climbed the maintenance ladder to the catwalk, coming up behind the first sniper. He didn't use a gun. He used a knife, silent and brutal. 1 down. He moved to the second. 2 down. Below Chiara was pinned. "Give it up, Vitale," Luca shouted from behind his cover. "We know it's you. Come out, and I'll let the little sister live." "You talk too much, Luca," Chiara yelled back. She leaned out and fired a burst, forcing him to duck. She checked her magazine. Low. "Dante, hurry up," she whispered to herself. Suddenly, a heavy metal door near Sofia opened. A massive man stepped out, one of the Russo enforcers, holding a shotgun. He walked straight toward Sofia, grabbing her by the hair. "Drop the gun, bitch," the enforcer yelled at Chiara. "Or I paint the floor with her brains." Chiara froze. She stepped out from behind the pillar, her rifle raised but steady. "Let her go," Chiara said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Drop it." Chiara slowly lowered the rifle to the ground. She kicked it away. She raised her hands. "Smart girl," the enforcer sneered. He pressed the shotgun barrel against Sofia's temple. Sofia squeezed her eyes shut, sobbing into the gag. Luca Russo stood up, brushing dust off his suit. He smiled a shark-like grin. "Well, well, the ghost returns. You look good, Chiara. A little dirty, but good." He walked toward her, gun drawn. "Dante isn't here to save you, is he? He probably sold you out to save his own skin." "Dante is occupied," Chiara said, her eyes flicking upward for a fraction of a second. Luca frowned. He looked up. On the catwalk, directly above the enforcer, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Dante didn't shoot. He jumped. He fell 20 feet, landing directly on the enforcer holding Sofia. The impact was bone-crushing. The enforcer crumpled under Dante's weight, the shotgun discharging harmlessly into the ceiling. Dante rolled, coming up with his pistol in hand. Bang! Bang! The enforcer didn't move again. Luca Russo stumbled back, eyes wide. "Cavallaro!" Before Luca could raise his weapon, Chiara had moved. She pulled a hidden knife from her boot, a habit she never broke, and closed the distance. She didn't stab him. She tackled him, driving him into the concrete. She pinned his gun arm with her knee and pressed the knife blade against his throat. "Don't!" Dante's voice cut through the chaos. He had cut Sofia's bonds and was pulling the sobbing girl into his good arm, shielding her eyes. "Chiara, don't kill him." Chiara was breathing hard, her hair wild, her eyes black with hate. "He touched my family." "We need him," Dante said, walking over. "We need to know who backed him. The Russos don't have the muscle to hit my penthouse alone. Someone helped them." Chiara pressed the blade deeper, drawing a thin line of blood on Luca's neck. "Who?" she snarled in Sicilian. "Para, speak." Luca laughed, a gurgling, wet sound. "You think you won?" "This isn't a war, Chiara. It's a coup." "Who?" she screamed. "Ask your boyfriend." Luca spat, looking at Dante. "Ask him about the Council of Five." Dante went rigid. The color drained from his face. Chiara looked at Dante. "What is he talking about?" Dante didn't answer. He looked at Luca with a terrifying expression. "The council doesn't exist. It's a myth." "Is it?" Luca grinned, blood on his teeth. "Check his pocket. The one you killed in the penthouse. My brother." Dante walked over to the corpse of the sniper they had left in the penthouse. Wait, no, the one Dante had just killed on the catwalk. He checked the body. He pulled out a heavy gold coin. It was stamped with a symbol, a 5-headed hydra. Dante stared at the coin, his hand trembling slightly. "What is it?" Chiara demanded, standing up and hauling Luca with her. "It means..." Dante said, his voice low and dangerous, that we have no allies. The Council of Five represents the heads of the global syndicates. If they backed the Russos, it means the entire world just declared war on us. He looked at Chiara, then at Sofia. We can't go back to Manhattan, Dante said. We have to run. Run where? Chiara asked. Dante pocketed the coin. Sicily. We go back to where it started, to the only place where the terrain kills you faster than the men. Chiara looked at her sobbing sister, then at the man who had just saved them both. She nodded. Then let's go home, she said. But as they turned to leave, dragging Luca with them as a prisoner, a slow clapping sound echoed from the dark entrance of the warehouse. They spun around, weapons raised. A figure stepped into the light. A woman. She was elegant, wearing a white trench coat, her grey hair pulled back in a severe bun. She held a cane, but she didn't look like she needed it. Bravo, the woman said. Her voice was smooth-cultured and terrifyingly familiar to Dante. Mother, Dante whispered, lowering his gun in shock. Lucrezia Cavallaro, the matriarch everyone believed had retired to a villa in Tuscany, smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. You're making a mess, Dante, she said, looking at the bodies. Then her eyes slid to Chiara. And you were supposed to stay dead, little Vitale. Dante stepped in front of Chiara. What are you doing here? Cleaning up, Lucrezia said. She tapped her cane on the floor. Suddenly, dozens of red laser dots appeared on Dante, Chiara, and Sofia's chests. The shadows of the warehouse were full of men. Not Russo men. Cavallaro men. The council didn't order the hit, Dante, Lucrezia said softly. I did. The silence in the warehouse was heavier than the smell of smoke. Lucrezia Cavallaro stood amidst the wreckage, like a statue carved from ice, her cane resting lightly on the concrete floor. The lasers dancing on Dante's chest were steady. Her men. Dante had grown up with men he had paid and fed, did not waver. You ordered the hit on me, Dante asked, his voice barely a whisper. The betrayal wasn't a knife in the back, it was a guillotine. Not on you, figlio mio, Lucrezia corrected her tone, remarkably conversational. On the girl, and on the Vitale girl's sister. I needed to flush out the rats. I needed to see if you were still a wolf, or if peace had made you a domesticated dog. She gestured to Chiara with her cane. And look what I found. You hesitated. You brought a Vitale into our home. You patched her wounds instead of ending her bloodline. You are compromised. She saved my life, Dante growled, stepping closer to Chiara, shielding Sofia's trembling body with his own. She seduced you. Lucrezia snapped the mask of calm, cracking for a second. The Council of Five isn't a myth, Dante. It is real, and they demand stability. A capo who sleeps with the enemy is a liability. Lucrezia sighed, adjusting her gloves. Kill her, Dante. Put a bullet in the Vitale girl's head right now, and we go home. You remain king. I retire. Order is restored. Chiara felt the heat of the fire behind her, but the cold radiating from Dante was more intense. She didn't beg. She didn't look at him. She shifted her grip on the knife still pressed against Luca Russo's throat. And if I say no? Dante asked. Lucrezia looked at her son with genuine sadness. Then I will mourn you, but I will not let you destroy this family. She raised her cane. The lasers sharpened. Now! Chiara screamed. She didn't attack Lucrezia. She spun and shoved Luca Russo, screaming and flailing, directly into the line of fire of the nearest guards. Reflexes took over. The guards flinched, holding fire to avoid hitting the Russo boss. In that split second of confusion, Dante didn't shoot his mother. He shot the fire extinguisher mounted on the rusted pillar next to the burning propane tank. Whoosh! A cloud of white chemical fog and pressurized gas exploded into the room, mixing with the smoke, blinding the thermal scopes, blinding the guards, blinding everyone. "Run!" Dante roared. He grabbed Sofia under one arm, grabbed Chiara's hand with the other, and they sprinted not toward the exit, but toward the dark, gaping maw of the meat chutes in the back wall. "Kill them!" Lucrezia shrieked from the fog. Gunfire erupted, chewing up the concrete where they had stood seconds ago. Dante kicked the metal grate of the chute open. "Jump! It dumps into the river!" Chiara didn't hesitate. She shoved Sofia down the slide, then jumped Dante following an instant later. They slid down the rusted steel tunnel, the sounds of shouting and gunfire fading, replaced by the rushing roar of the East River. They hit the freezing black water with a bone-jarring impact. Dante surfaced, gasping, the salt water stinging his shoulder wound. He found Chiara holding Sofia, treading water in the shadow of the rotting pier. Above them, the warehouse burned, casting a hellish orange glow on the water. "They'll be watching the roads," Dante coughed, wiping water from his eyes. "We can't go back to the city." Chiara looked at him. The waitress was gone. The frightened girl was gone. In the moonlight, wet and shivering, she looked unstoppable. "We don't go to the city," she said, switching to the dialect of their ancestors. "Gemu amare." "We go to the sea." Dante nodded. He reached out and took her hand underwater. The pact was sealed. No longer capo and waitress, no longer cavallaro and vitale. Just two ghosts against the world. "Sicily," Dante whispered. "We settle this in the dirt where it began." And that is where our story ends, for now. Dante and Chiara have escaped the fire, but they've lost their kingdom. They are now hunted by the most dangerous woman in the world, Dante's own mother, and the entire global Mafia syndicate. They are heading to Sicily, to the old country, where the rules are different and the blood feuds never die. I hope you enjoyed this darker, grittier take on the Mafia romance genre. If you did, please smash that like button. It tells YouTube you want more stories like this. Subscribe so you don't miss the sequel, The Sicilian Exile, coming soon. Who do you think will win in Sicily? The mother or the son? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.